A good Sunday afternoon, and you look at a picture in Montgomery County, Maryland. That's the National Institutes of Health, and that's now the Walter Reed Medical Center. Was the Naval Medical Center. And here's a picture near the Landmark Theater in Bethesda. Um, and Today, I want to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court rulings, several of them, just quickly, and runs down some of them. And we'll stand. One of them is specifically about Montgomery County, Maryland, where I just showed you some pictures. And that would be Mahmood versus Taylor, which basically says that the ruling says that parents have a right to opt out of children's, at least in lower grades, of children's lessons on particularly GLBTQ plus topics, particularly the reading maybe of some books. I happened to review this one uh, by Grunkle some time ago. In fact, I even have the review there. Um, and or so I was thinking of Gavin Grimm. I have his book. I've actually met him. It was another case, but the or to have certain materials have the right to have their kids opt out of certain materials. I don't know how far that goes. I don't know if it goes as far as I think it does apparently go so far as pronouns and some of the other things. Um, and one of the things I think that was noted, and I think was noted in one of the opinions, is some of the stuff seemed to be indoctrination, in an ideology beyond just religious idea or scientific controversies, like what used to be the theory of evolution or intelligent design, which is starting to look much more likely with quantum theory, the way quantum entanglement, the idea of reincarnation or the idea of spirit beings living in other dimensions and that sort of thing, which is still religious right now. Maybe the opinion would allow parents to take kids out of that if it was being taught, which is not, because it's generally not considered science. And some of it's becoming closer to being considered science. So if you follow the most recent developments in quantum theory, it's still uncertain how it's going to turn out. But that's one of the problems. If you allow the parents to pull their kids out of certain things, then how do you control it? Um, but they did talk a lot about the fact specifically there was many parents had a problem with the indoctrination getting beyond even our earlier ideas about non-discrimination and so forth, and getting into areas like the use of pronouns and gender identity, and the theories behind it and so forth. It's not, which some people don't accept as completely accepted science. And yeah, so we kind of expected that. Um, to move on, to another topic, and I'll just show you there's a web page for the Supreme Court opinions. We just talked about Mahmoud versus Taylor, Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. Um, Again, this is about whether, in the case of this is in the case of Texas, but a lot of other states have laws. Virginia has laws, and this is whether states can require websites to verify the user's ages before allowing users to see the material. and make sure they're over 18. When if it in this case it's if a website is more than 1/3 adult in nature, or in some states it's a fourth. Generally, that's the way they've been written in a lot of states. I think that's true in Virginia too. Um, and of course the controversy is sort of more that we don't have very good age verification that's very secure. That was an issue back with the COPA trial, the Child Online Protection Act, when it was resolved in 2007. And I think before that, that was actually resolved by the Eastern District in Pennsylvania. I actually went to a day of that. Um, but even before that, the Supreme Court has suggested that COPA might be unconstitutional. But Amy Coney Barrett in the oral argument said, things have changed with smartphones and everything. It's harder to keep up. And maybe we can have better age detection technology. And maybe it would be something like devices. Maybe a device would be tied to a particular owner and would have biometric identification of any user, and only a user whose age was over 18 would be allowed to use the device for anything. And then that device could visit a porn site. Maybe that's a solution. Or maybe it's just setting up some kind of database, but using, biometric, pass keys rather than passwords, and biometric identification but beneath it, and doing, the kind of stuff that Microsoft is going to enforce on us users by August 1st. You might have heard about that. It's sort of a technique for making this whole idea more secure. Um, Electronic Frontier Foundation also has an article about the opinion, which I'll give you the link for it. But I, objecting very much to the opinion. I think it's coming that eventually we're going to have age verification, and maybe even to discuss just generally mature content, not even discuss concepts, even discuss gender identity versus gay rights or something in general as a concept in front of kids. So we might wind up needing that someday. That could be where we're headed. And if you had device verification, or you had very strict age and secure age verification available, it might expand to a lot of other things. That's just my impression, even my site, which I don't have any adult images at all on my sites or my YouTube channels, my John W. Bush or my blog. I don't have any age verification at all. So I don't have any nude images or sexually explicit images at all. I have a few places where I have some marginally discussion of sexually explicit concepts, but no images. So I probably wouldn't have to worry about it now. You could have a case of being sued by somebody by another state, even though you don't live in that state. If they had a law, if their users could reach your site, that could be another problem, I would think. So, if I were the president, I'm too old, I'm 81, but about to be 82. But if I was the president, I'd call in the chief of Microsoft and chief of Apple and some of the social media companies into the White House, and we'd sit down and we'd talk about how can we really age verify internet users much more reliably than we can now, and do it securely, and even do it in the face of AI. Artificial intelligence might be an issue too, with securing it. I would jawbone it if I were the president and try to get it done, and probably talk to the public about it. It's probably what I would do. I think Trump knows who I am too. What if I say that in a tweet to him or something? That's what I would do. And if I were elected, but I'm not very electable. But that was, we've talked about that before a lot. Talked about COPA. Um, the another problem talking and um, well, let me just say this. CBS, Kevin Jennings on CBS recently, um, recently was interviewed on CBS. Kevin Jennings is I think, and head of the Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund, which I contribute to through my mechanism, through my trust. And he talked about the risk that gay marriage, that Obergefell that could be overturned, and that Alito and Thomas want to do it. If you got three more justices, we might see Obergefell go. And when I was coming out, it was finally came in 2015. We thought the battle was over, but when I was 72, or almost turning. I was almost 72 when it came out. I had most of my adult life without it, even though I didn't get married. I didn't, and without a lot of the anti-discrimination protections. I was pretty much okay because I assimilated pretty well and behaved, well enough to not get in trouble most of the time, although not perfectly. And that could, we've seen Trump, ban transgender from the military. There hasn't been any. I haven't heard any talk of banning gays in the military specifically. That wasn't the Supreme Court, though. That was Congress back in 2010 and 2011. And that's, LGB without the T's. Trump seems to be going along with that right now. Would he forever? Because there are problems in the gay issue. There are problems in the gay issue, too. What about surrogacy? For example, there are states that want to ban that and want to ban gay adoption by gay people because they think, particularly the surrogacy, because they think a baby needs its mother, but maybe adoption would be a good thing. And what about, could Lawrence versus Texas be rolled back to all the way back to Hardwick versus Ballard in '86? I think Kevin Jennings talked about that this morning. And I certainly hope not, but way back in the mid 1980s, with AIDS, there were real big questions about public health, and they almost blew up in Texas in 1983 when they tried to expand the state sodomy law. When I was living in Dallas, and to try to make a much tougher law back in '83 before we even had identified the virus and the blood issue, and then they made up all kinds of other hypothetical scenarios that I don't know that they've gone away. As far as lifestyle is concerned, I think, COVID was 180 degrees the opposite of AIDS and how it was spread. And it was a disease that attacked large nuclear families. It was actually a disease that fed on traditional family values, particularly among poorer people. So it gets pretty complicated. On the birthright issue, that's mostly about procedure. That's the Trump versus Castle opinion, and that's mostly what that's resulting is lots of class action suits now being brought up in a lot of areas in individual or in parsing the case so that you won't have, since you can't depend on one court to hamper the executive in doing these things, you've got to bring lots of different cases. So there's that. Medina versus Planned Parenthood means that that's another one there, which is going to affect the state supporting which affects Parenthood getting federal Planned Parenthood, I think, getting funds if a state doesn't want to give funds because of some of the services or other services like contraception or even cancer prevention or something. If it bans Planned Parenthood because of the abortion issue, it can affect other things. I think that was what that was about. You can read that opinion also. But yeah, I wanted to, just go through these. Again, it just seems to me that a lot of this comes down to individualism on my part, whether things are about individual actions, individual responsibilities, or whether they're about, oppressed groups and oppressor groups, and whether they're about people sticking to their own beliefs or having to make alliances with others with whom they might disagree with. That's kind of a big issue for me right now. So that's just what I wanted to talk about today, to just go over over the cases. I'll put the links in the description and encourage you to read it. And I do thank you for listening.